Meet Billy. In 5 years, Billy will have spent 605 days sleeping and 2.5 full days brushing his teeth, hopefully. He will have sat in traffic for 9 full days. Billy hates traffic. And in 5 years, he will have spent 433 days working. Social media will have taken up 152 consecutive days of his life. He will have walked 3,650 miles and spoken 29.2 million words, hopefully good ones. In 5 years, Billy will have spent 76 days eating and drinking. Billy loves dessert. 2.5 years out of the 5 will be spent consuming media, with 228 days spent watching TV. Billy is messy. He will have spent 152 days cleaning. And in 5 years, he will have spent roughly $40,000 on food, 40 days shopping, and 50 days socializing with the homies. Welcome to you in 5 years.
Well, thank you so much, Justin, Praise Band, for leading us in that opening song this morning. And thank you once again for being here, being a part of what's going on. If you are joining in, this is your first time at Salem, I'm actually right in the middle of this series called You in 5 Years. And this is a series that for the last few weeks we've been doing and talking about. And really at the center of this question is, who will I be by the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026. That's what I want you to think about. So often we start the year off and we think, well, who can I be within a year? What kind of goals can I set for the next 12 months? I don't want us to do that. I want us to think bigger. Who can I be over the next 60 months? And really that question, as I said last week, has 2 parts. One of those parts is simply this: if I continue on the path that I'm on right now, who will I be? So where will I end up? Or the other question, this is really where I want you to go, who can I be if I make just a few small adjustments to the path that I'm currently on? You see, all of us are on a path, and that path is taking us somewhere. It's going to naturally end out at some sort of destination. And the question that lies before all of us today is, who can I be if I switch that path just a little bit? Now, this is the 3rd week in the series, and each single week is building on the last week. So if you've not seen the first couple weeks, I hope you'll go back and do that. But last week, what I really wanted us to hone in on and focus in on was the role that crisis plays in our lives. It's the crisis, the single crisis moments, sometimes the multiple crises that happen in our life that can become the catalyst for change in your life. And we want to remember that. We want to rely on that and think about that as we go forward, because, if we continue to just sit at ease and sit in this state of inertia or laziness, then we'll never change. So we need those moments of crisis to push us. But today, I want to actually revisit something that I just hinted at on week 1. And in week 1, what I said to us was that we needed these small, steady steps in our lives, or you might call them baby steps. In fact, that's what I'm going to call them all throughout today, is we need these baby steps. Now, I don't know if your kids are like mine, but my son, he's 5 years old now, my son still loves to play Mother May I. I don't know if your kids have ever done that or not, but I don't quite get it. I don't understand this thing, but they love to play it either way. But you know what they don't love? They don't like to ask mother for baby steps. That's never the thing that they ask for, right? It's always like, hey, mother, may I have like 10 giant steps? It's always giant. It starts out with giant. My wife has to stop it and be like, we're not doing giant steps, or at least not 10. You can take 1 giant step, right? And they would go giant steps. They'd go bunny hops. They'd swim like a fish in the floor. But they do not like to choose baby steps. And even when they do or are forced to take baby steps because mother says you need to take baby steps, then it's like regular size steps. They can't quite get down the baby step principle. And you know what? What's true for my 5-year-old, I think is also true for the 55-year-old and everyone in between, the 15 and the 25 and the 30 and the 35. And I'm going to go on like an auctioneer here in a minute. But we don't like to take tiny steps. But those tiny steps, those baby steps in our lives are actually really, really important. There's an old Chinese proverb that many of you have probably heard before. It was actually first said by the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu said this. He said, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with what? One step." It's one step that sets you on this 1,000-mile journey. I mean, you think, man, it's overwhelming that we have to take this huge leap to think about where we're going to be 5 years from now. All of that space, that time, that energy, all of the things in front of me. But no matter how long the journey is in front of you and what God is calling you to, it all starts in the same way, with one single step. And if you keep on baby stepping it day after day, week after week, month after month, you'll get there. Mother, may I? Yes, you may. Mother, may I? Yes, you may. Mother, may I? Yes, you may. And before you know it, you've traveled 1,000 miles down this path. I got to give some mad props to my mortgage broker today. Erin Hooper, some of you know her. You know, it's a small town friendly place, so many people know Erin. But I was kind of scrolling through Facebook this past week, like many would tend to be doing. And as I was scrolling through it, I came across a post that Erin put up. And no, it was not a Bernie Sanders meme. I saw plenty of those this week. In fact, I was really, really tempted to put some of those up just for laughs. But I didn't do that, and it wasn't a Bernie Sanders meme. It said this right here. Here's what the meme was. It says, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. Sometimes the smallest step in the right or correct direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. And as I saw that, I kind of stopped and I was like, that's it. That's exactly what I was trying to help us understand in week one of this series, that we want to make a giant leap of change, but the wheels of change in your life and in my life, they're large, and they take time to get going. We need in our lives consistency of small steps, not the intensity of large, huge, massive steps. But having said all that, the truth is this idea of small steps in our lives leading to a 1,000-mile journey should be both exciting and terrifying. It should give us, it should move us to action, but it should also give us pause in our lives because it's a two-edged sword that swings both ways. Right? This is one very important word that I saw on the Facebook meme that showed up, and that is right or correct. Right? Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction or the correct direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. And you see, this is such an important word because depending on which direction you're facing, your small step is either a terrific thing or it's a terrible thing. What could be the biggest step of your life in the right direction could just as easily become the worst step of your life if you take it in the wrong direction. This meme could have just as easily said sometimes the smallest step in the wrong direction ends up being the worst step of your life. It could go both ways, meaning if I take a single step in the wrong direction, then I could very easily end up even further than where I wanted to be. So instead of just being 1,000 miles away, after 5 years, I could end up being 2,000 miles away from where I originally wanted to go. And you see, we get to where we want to be, and we get to where we don't want to be in life in the exact same way. One day at a time, one move at a time, one breath at a time, one baby step at a time. And in today's message, that's exactly what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the way that something small in our lives ends up adding up over time. And as we think about that, I want us to learn how to move more specifically and deal more specifically with those moments of despair in our lives. And they're going to come. Moments of despair that hits you when you realize or you think you might be moving in the wrong direction. Now, in order to help us, I want to actually look at two different passages of Scripture this morning. So if you've got your Bibles following along, either in your app or maybe you got the old paperback or the leather bound pulled out in front of you, I want you to bookmark two places that we're going to go today. First, I'm going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, and I'm going to look at the end of that passage there, or that chapter there, and then I'm going to flip over to Exodus chapter 23, and I'm going to look at that passage there at the end of that chapter. And the reason that I want to do this is not because they're two separate passages. In fact, in Deuteronomy 7 and Exodus 23, 23, they're the same story. They're the same sort of moment in Israel's history, but there's a detail in Exodus 23 that gets left out in Deuteronomy 7. And so I want to help us understand the extra detail that's added in there. But before I can get to any of those things, I just want to set up the scene for this, because what we see in Deuteronomy 7 and Exodus chapter 23 is sort of a pep rally. It's an ancient pep rally for Israel when they're standing just on the other side of the promised land. And just a little bit of a backstory so you can kind of understand where they're coming from in this moment. This is a huge moment that has been building in the life of the Israelites for over 400 years. For over 400 years prior to this moment, their forefather, a man by the name of Abraham, some of you may know, he was given a promise by God. And the promise that was given to him by God was, number one, Abraham, you will become a great nation. You're going to own all the things that are in front of you, and your children will be as numerous as the stars. And on top of that, on top of all of this, being a great nation, your children being as numerous as stars, all the nations of the world will be blessed through you. Now, this is pretty amazing for any of us, but in Abraham's case, it was phenomenal because he and his wife were super old at this point in time, and they could not imagine having any children whatsoever coming their way. But this is the promise that was given to this nation 400 years ago, 400 years prior. And after that, they would struggle to find their place in the world. With each new generation, the challenges would be placed before them to figure out exactly how they could continue to live into the promise, to walk into the promise of the future that God had given to them. They suffered through Egyptian slavery. They suffered under the tyranny of an evil Pharaoh. And when they tried to break free time and time again, they struggled in this endeavor to reach a promised land, to become a great nation, to figure out how in the world that the entire world would be blessed through them. And 400 years later, after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, they're now standing on the edge of the promised land. And it's in this space where they feel like finally they have arrived. Finally, they've made it after 400 and some odd years. They're standing at the edge of this reality that God had promised so many centuries before, and they can live into it. And here is the pep rally that's getting ready to take place. Here is what's happening in their life. And here's where they stand, about to enter all that God was wanting for them and giving to them. And they need a pep. They need a pep talk from God. Well, why would they need a pep talk? I mean, they've made it through centuries of hardship and centuries of slavery. Why would they need this? Because God needed to remind them that the path in front of them was as difficult as the path behind them. God needed to remind them that there was going to be struggles, and there were going to be times where they would get off track, and there was going to be a space where they were standing on the edge of their new reality. And they still needed a push by God to know that they can make it. They stand there, and they need to be reminded, like some of us, that even if we're looking face to face with our new reality, we're not going to get there overnight. We may be standing on the edge of the promised land. Tomorrow, they're going to wake up. They're going to anticipate that something is going to be different. But tomorrow, they're going to continue to make baby steps the same way they have for the past 400 years. Tomorrow they're going to wake up and they're going to have to continue to take steps forward like they still have wandering in the wilderness over the past 40 years. And like their ancestors did for the past 400 years, they will take one baby step after the next. And just like them, you and I, we need this pep talk. We need this pep talk like they did, because it's not going to be easy for some of you to become the person that God wants you to be over the next 5 years. It's going to be easy for you to just continue to stay with your problem, to stay with that temper that gets out of control. It's going to be easy for us to just continue to hold on to some of those unhealthy habits that we've adopted in our lives. It's going to be easy for us to stay argumentative or cantankerous or gossipy or critical. It's going to be easy for us to just sort of live into that reality. It's easy to not to do anything, but to want everything, to be entitled to everything, to have it given to us. That's the easiest thing in the world. You don't have to do anything, you just let life pass you by. That's going to be easy to just sort of coast over the next 5 years. And that's what's happening to so many of us right now. So many of us get into these spaces in life where we anticipate that the daily steps will come to an end. Tomorrow is going to be a brand new day. And when we wake up tomorrow, we'll launch ourselves into a new era. And the journey will be over for us, right? We finally arrived. And I know within our congregation and our community, there are many people who are looking for many different arrivings tomorrow, right? Some of you are out there, you were just waiting this past week for the inauguration to come and go because you knew it was going to launch a new era in our world and in our nation and around the world. And others of you, you were waiting for the Great Awakening to happen. You just imagined that was going to happen and that was going to take place and a new tomorrow was going to come. And I don't care what you're waiting for. I don't care what is out in front of you. I want to remind you today that there are still yet more steps to be taken. And the steps yet to be taken can be even more daunting than the steps that are behind us. The steps that lie in front of us, the journey that still we are on, can be just as difficult and arduous as that which is behind us. And this was exactly the world that the Israelites faced as they looked into the Promised Land. A new day surely was about to dawn, but in that new space where they were heading, there were new challenges. There were new foes. There were new enemies that lie out there. And God knew, as they stood on the edge of the Promised Land, that Israel was going to be scared to death. Because they would have imagined that everything that they had come through in the past was over. And as they get into this new space and they find nations who are great and mighty and standing in front of them large and tall, they're going to feel small and insignificant. They would feel as if every step in front of them, because of the difficulty, was a step in the wrong direction. Perhaps you felt this way. Perhaps you've been in that scenario in life, that season of life that's so confusing and dangerous and doesn't seem to make any sense at all. But what God wanted from them to understand was that it is exactly in that season, in that moment, that they would thrive. And what God wants you to understand in this moment of difficulty and confusion and danger is that this is the space where you too can thrive. Because it's in those moments of transition, in those moments of desperation, that we as a human race, as sons and daughters of God, it's in that space that we become more and more and more dependent upon God. In our weakness, as Paul would say, He is made strong. In our seasons of uncertainty, what we discover is that God is our steady rock, that Christ Jesus is the one in whom we can lean upon and can become our anchor in the midst of any and every storm. And this is the season of steady, uncertain steps that God spoke to them about and that God speaks to us about. Listen to what he says in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 17, if you're following along. He says these words as they stood there looking in the Promised Land. He said, if you should say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? How I'm looking at them and it seems larger than anything we've ever been able to accomplish. How can we go forward? Are we heading in the right direction still? He goes on in verse 18, you shall not fear. You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt. I love what he's telling them here as he's speaking these words. You shall remember. Don't look at the limitations. Don't look at what your opposition is doing right in front of you. Look at the Lord. And as you look at the Lord, I want you to remember. Remember what God has already brought you through. Remember what God has already done for you. And that's why at these pivotal moments in our lives, you have to pull from those past moments. You have to pull back into your memory banks, and you have to draw those things back to your mind. When we in life are presented with the present moments of uncertainty, what we're called to do is pull back to mind those moments of clarity that come in the past. We're to pull back those past moments of clarity and bring them back to life. David did this when he faced Goliath. As he stood in front of that giant, David pulled from past moments of clarity where he had defeated the lion and the bear. The apostles did this very keenly when they stood in front of those who would accuse them of various things. When they spoke of Jesus, they not only spoke of what Jesus did, but they pulled from the past where God had worked in this person and that person and led them to this moment. And they defended the early church by pulling from those past memories. And as Israel is standing there facing the uncertainty about their next steps, God asked them to do the same thing. He says, as you're looking into your future and it seems uncertain and it seems clouded, what I need you to do is remember. I need you to remember what I did at the Red Sea. I need you to remember how I smote the Egyptian army that day when you thought that I wouldn't be able to do it. I need you to remember the way that the Nile River turned to blood and that locusts fled in like a plague. I need you to remember that I am God and I am still in control. I need you to remember these things. Remember them. Don't forget them as you face your opposition, as you face new challenges, as you face the uncertainty of the future. I need you to remember what I've already done for you in the past. And so in verse 21, he goes on in chapter 7, and he says, do not be terrified of them, for the Lord your God is great and awesome God, and he is among you. And the same way that God was the God who brought them through the Red Sea 40 years ago, who had defeated the Egyptian army and who had set them free, who had led them through so many things, that God is still with them. He's still among them. And look at this as he goes on in verse 22. And the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. And I don't want you to miss this next part. If you're at home, wherever you are with me today, say it with me. Little by little. I will drive out those nations before you, little by little. Another way of interpreting this is step by step. You will be unable to. You will be unable to destroy them all at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. I don't know quite all that's going on here, but apparently, if you get rid of everything, then there's going to be a ton of beasts that come in and take over. We'll come back to that a little later. Verse 23, but the Lord your God will deliver them over to you and will inflict defeat upon them until they are destroyed. Little by little. It'll happen. He'll be able to lead them through this battle, through this challenge, through the tough times, but it's going to happen little by little. Who would do this? But he's not going to do it all at once. It's going to happen incrementally over and over again. And this is the same story that actually gets told in Exodus chapter 23. But in Exodus chapter 23, as we look at this sort of parallel passage, there's just one more detail that we get, one more sort of very specific detail that comes to us in verse 29. He says, again, a similar passage to Deuteronomy chapter 7, in verse 29, he says, I will not drive them out before you in 1 year. I love the fact that he kind of hones in on that 1 year, because for us, we expect things to move in 1 year cycles, right? This is the whole reason that I wanted to kind of outline this series for us, is because we expect God to show up and do something in the 1 year, in the 12 months, and so we're setting that goal and forget that we've got 5 years, or we've got 10 years, or we've got 20 years lying ahead of us, and that we need to live our lives into that reality. But he says in this space right here, I will not drive them out before you in 1 year. If you were hoping that this would be your New Year's resolution, think again. Lest the land become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. So instead, look at it this way. Verse 30. Again, little by little. Little by little, I will drive them out from before you, until you have increased and you inherit the land. So God was saying, look, I've got this. I've got it. I'm holding the whole thing in my hand, and I understand the progress of what's going to happen, but it's not going to happen on your timeline. It's not going to happen in this year, but it will happen step by step, little by little. Trust me. Don't be scared. I've got all the power in the universe in my hands, and if you doubt it, just remember what I did in the years past. Remember what I did at the Red Sea. If you doubt it, just remember what I did when I brought you out of Egypt and into this place. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to take every step with you. Little by little, I will be there, and you're going to grow into this new reality every single day. Are there crisis moments in our lives? Yes, absolutely. There are crisis moments that happen in our lives that dramatically shake us awake and sort of jar us back into reality. Those happen. But listen to me carefully. the change that you really need, the change that you really seek in life is not found only in the crisis moments. It's found in your steady transformation. It's found in your steady growth. It's found in the steps you take day after day. And if I'm honest for just a minute, this is something that I think we've forgotten in American Christianity. And if you're a Christian or a follower of Christ out there, I want you to listen carefully to me for a minute. And if you're not a follower of Christ and you're listening, then you just get to listen to me rail at Christians for a minute. You know, for us within the context of the American church, we want everything right now. The prayers that we pray, you know, they need to happen right now, answers right now. And the most important thing that has taken place in the context of our churches over the past few years is that there are prayers that are prayed in the altar, and those become the only ones that are that are important. And that's become so important in our lives that we've forgotten the lives that need to be lived after that prayer. We've forgotten that when we stand up from the altar, there's still a life of discipleship that takes place on the other side. If you're not a follower of Christ and you've ever had this question come through your mind, if you ever wondered why Christians don't really live and act like Christians, it's because of this right here. It's because we focused on the moment of crisis rather than focusing on the movement of God's Spirit in our life after that crisis. It's because we focused on what theologically we call justification, and we've neglected what we would call sanctification, living a life of holiness. We've focused on those crisis moments instead of the constant journey. And yet time and time again, the stories of our faith tell us something very simple. We will grow in grace our entire lives. We are to experience as a people of God and a people who've chosen to live our lives according to God's Spirit with new mercies in front of us every single day, living a life that is dependent upon the Creator of the universe, the one who not only creates but also sustains us. You know, and I'm a Methodist preacher. I don't put it out there in the front all the time, but I am. And as a Methodist preacher, one of the things that I commit to every single day is that I will move more and more towards Christian perfection each day of my life. You see, the truth is that we can no longer afford to stay focused on the moment that we forget about our movement. We forget that we are called to be a people of the Spirit who move within the context of the Spirit every single day, little by little, step by step. And when the steps get confusing, when the steps get complicated, when the steps get hard and more difficult for us to face, what we're forced to do in those moments is to look back and remember that it's God who has brought us to this space. It is God who has seen us through difficulty before, and it is God who continues to be with us in the future that lies ahead. I mean, right here is the entirety of my message right here. Victory in our lives, victory in your life, it's not found in one huge step. It's not discovered in one major move, one major leap from one cliff to another. Victory in your life is discovered in the baby steps that are continually repeated in your life. And that's what I want you to remember today. Victory won't be found in the one huge step, but it's going to be found in the baby steps that you continually repeat in your life. That right there, that's what I want you to remember. You can stop right now. You can go your merry way. I'm going to keep talking for a couple more minutes, but I don't want you to forget that point. Because victory isn't just one huge thing, right? We accomplish this task, all of a sudden, boom, we're undefeated. It comes to us in the day-to-day, living it out. Living as a people of the Spirit, caught up in the movement of the Spirit in the world. It's one city at a time for the ancient Israelites. It's one battle at a time for an ancient Israelites. It's well, what about the Hivites? We conquered the Hivites. Okay, well, now go on to the Girgashites, right? Well, we've conquered the Girgashites. What about, now we go on to the Jebusites. That's what you need to do. Okay, well, I got the Jebusites. What about termites? Sorry, I mean, you get it. You get this. You understand what I'm getting at. You go from the hill country, you go to the flats. You go to the fortified cities, you go to the ones that don't have anything. He said to them, I'm not going to have this done in 1 year. It's not going to be done in a year. And I'm not saying this prophetically over anybody, but I do want to say, maybe that's the case for you. Maybe it's the case that in your life right now, the things that you're struggling with and you're wrestling with, guess what? It's not going to be done in a year. that's okay. Because God's not over. God's not finished. And everything that lies in the context of your life, God still wants to carry out and finish in your life. God still wants to continue to push you forward and to give you the faith you need to make it in this world. You know, I started with that Chinese proverb that says every journey, or every journey towards 1,000 miles starts with one step. And I love that statement by Lao Tzu, but there's one problem with it that I noticed. The problem is simply this. Lao Tzu had absolutely no conception whatsoever of miles. Like, that wasn't a thing. It wasn't what he talked about at all. In fact, the original statement says that every 1,000 li journey starts with a single step. Now, the question is, well, what's a li? I mean, it's equivalent to a mile, right? No, it's not actually. 1 li is the equivalent of 360 miles. 360 miles. So when he says that every 1,000 li journey starts with a single step, what he's ultimately saying in terms that we would understand is every 360,000 mile journey starts with a single step. Now, you know, it's easy to say every 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step because in our minds we can actually accomplish that. I follow somebody on TikTok who actually is bike riding across the United States, which is about 2,500 miles, right? So if you're taking a 1,000-mile journey, that's just halfway across the states. You can do that. I've seen people, Forrest Gump did it, right? I mean, he ran across and back and across. Like, you can do that. That's easy. Let me put this into context. A 360,000-mile journey, that's 14 and a half times around the earth. That's what that is. A 360,000-mile journey, well, heck, you can make it 1 1/3 times around the largest planet in our solar system, Jupiter. That's how many miles that is. You say, well, what's the point? The point is, Lao Tzu knew a deep wisdom about journeys in our life. To suggest that you would ever travel 1,000 li is not to suggest something that can be attainable, but to suggest something that will never come to an end. There's a powerful, powerful point locked away in that right there. You see, we don't get in this journey of faith to say, well, one day I arrived and I can sit back. Like, if you're watching me today and you're in that like 70, 80-year-old category or maybe a little more, then you're like, I don't even know if I'm going to have 5 years from now. Listen, you still have to buy into this. You still have to lean into this reality in Scripture, because over and over again what we discover is that we are consistently, no matter how old you are, on a journey that God is inviting us into to step by step move towards growth. And no matter how old or young you are, we live into that reality that not another day is promised, but every day is sacred. Not another day is granted to us without any ifs, ands, or buts, but every day is sacred. And so we'll take every step in that sacred way, with that sacred moment on us. Now, I know this takes a lot of faith. I know it's hard. It's challenging. But it's God who gives us that ability to believe. You know, the journey that the Israelites, that 400 and some odd year journey that the Israelites started, as I told you earlier, it goes all the way back to Abraham. And Abraham is a person who could live faithfully into the journey of God, the promises of God, because he realized those promises? No, he didn't see those promises come to fruition. He was faithful because he believed even when he couldn't see. Friends, that's faith. That's faith, to live into something that you can't see and you can't hold. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to invite the praise band to sing this one final song, Give Me Faith, because I know for some of you it's hard right now. It's hard to imagine that the next steps of this journey are still part of God's plan. It's hard for you to imagine the difficulties that we face as families and as a country, as society, that that's just going to be okay. But this is the journey. And we all need the faith to help us walk this journey. God, thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of your family. Thank you for the open invitation that you give to us each and every day to continue to believe even when we cannot see. So God, this morning as we sit here thinking about our future and maybe some of the challenges that lie before us, as we wrestle with some of the fear that we hold in our hearts about what you're calling us to, I would just ask that you would start to fill our hearts up with faith. And as we sing this final song, God, overwhelm us with the possibility that despite what we see happen around us, you are still there. You are still guiding us on this journey. You are still in control of our lives. We give all of ourselves over to you, God. And even in the midst of our weakness, let us find your strength. In Christ's name we pray.